Good morning, everybody. Right, so let's make a video. I've stopped making videos every day, at least for the short term, because it feels like it's just so uneventful. I feel like the majority of my analysis usually takes place on a weekly time frame anyway. And with that, gives us a lot of confidence, or a bit more confidence as to where we're going over over a period of months, really, perhaps towards the end of this year, maybe into next as well. I'm not writing off the idea that this cycle is different and it will extend. Again, I think it's all highly correlated now with stock markets, since the ETFs obviously it would be. Those have all really sort of, I wouldn't say changed the way that the market moves for crypto, but it's certainly influenced it, for better or for worse. For those of us with, a handful of bitcoins, whatever, it's obviously good. For the alts, it's not so good. The dominance chart finding its bounce all the way from November 2022 and basically continuing on from there. There were periods in the past where, in this cycle, I suppose, where we did have bearish divergence on the RSI, which led to little mini peaks and pullbacks to the 20 moving average. Again, that was another double whammy here that sort of came up and didn't even correspond to the bearish divergence. This one had bearish divergence, came down to the 10. This one had bearish divergence, eventually led down to the 20. And again, we've got another bearish divergence on the weekly as well. So it seems reasonable that a pullback at least to the 20 moving average, around 63 to 64% dominance, is going to take place. We also have, and again, we marvel at this for, like we know what we're talking about, but the overheated money flow index, which was the second highest, really. I mean, you can count this, but it was the third highest, let's just say, then, just to be accurate, that we'd ever seen. And we did see a reasonable pullback from the overextended read here, and now we've got bearish divergence here, and we continue with it as we've seen higher highs. I mean, it's a bullish chart. There's no getting away from it. It's been bullish since the golden cross back down here at 50%, and then another one around here around 52%, and we just keep rising and rising and rising. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to come down. It's giving signals that you would look at any chart as a top, or close to a top. I mean, it is. There is no getting away from the fact that we've got multiple bearish divergence, regular ones, on the RSI, and we've also got them on the money flow index, which is normally on a weekly. Normally you look for two drives for getting out of town. We do have one here after last week's close. So that could be it, really. I mean, it really honestly could be it. We could be looking to see this meltdown take place relatively soon. And the meltdowns, when they do happen, they happen quite quickly. Even in this last cycle, when we've had alt seasons, they take place within a 6-week period, and they're quite fast. We've had certain coins, certain charts do hundreds, some even multiple hundreds, even I think even some up to 1,000%. And these are still big coins that have done that, but then they just give it all back. But that is not dissimilar to how alt seasons or markets have behaved previously. To be honest with you, that is how they behave. So let's have a look at Ethereum on the last cycle before it all went, parabolic. We do have periods of extended growth. We do have periods of complete collapse and consolidation back to where we came from. We have another period of growth. We have another period of absolutely wiping it all off the table. Again, black swan in this instance, no black swan in this instance. Natural, unnatural. And then from there, we started to move up. This is just Ethereum, by the way. This is just our mate Ethereum. And we spent the vast majority of the previous cycle, floating between, as low as 80, really, and about as high as about 400. But really, if you take a slice through the price, we're talking roughly around 120, roughly around 300. So it fannied around for a very long period within this area. And again, for those who haven't been around in the last cycle, or even the one before that, or if this is your first time round, and you're expecting altcoins to just power on through and hold, and move in the same way that Bitcoin, it's generally not going to be the case. You'll find a few that are able to do that, but the majority can't, and they never have, and there's no real reason as to why this time would be different. However, are they going to explode again? The evidence, I would say, points to yes, that they will, and it will likely all explode as it has done in the past. That's optimistic, but it's also the more likely scenario. So there's Ethereum for you. There's the Bitcoin dominance for you. Let's have a quick look at Bitcoin, and then we'll move on actually, we'll end with Bitcoin because nobody really cares about that, do they? Really? Let's have a look at the total 2, which exists here, and we're still floating around that magical area, that $1.12 billion zone. Green candle is green candle, price is price, and if we close at this level or higher, we'll be back above the 20 moving average. Where we want to be would also be hopefully a little bit higher. We could get, and I mean literally just by a point above the 21. The overall expectation I have continues to be that we will float around and move up to a new high. I'm not saying we're going to double or triple or quadruple. I'm just saying we're going to move up to a new, well, at least a new local high, if not a new all-time high, between now and September. That's always the case. That's still the case. I still very much believe that. We had the low, we had the high, then we had the higher low, the higher high, the higher low. And then we're moving still onto a high high. We've not made a lower low, so this is still a trend in play. It was just a bit sketchy with all the stuff that was going on in the world, but yeah, it's still a higher high and a higher low and a higher high and a higher low, and we are still looking for the higher high. Now, anecdotally, in cycles past, or at least in the last one, if anyone recalls what things were like in 2020, towards the end of 2020, and the sentiment around altcoins was extremely low. They hadn't done much for a while. They'd had a couple of alt seasons each year, or one alt season each year, decent ones obviously. The market cap was smaller, so the gains were obviously a lot higher. It wasn't as saturated as a market as it is at the moment. Obviously with every day that goes by, it just gets more and more diluted by all the other crap coins that just get generated out of thin air, and that's going to obviously, there's more money, but there's more dilution, so you get less gains, and it's certainly less confidence. But we are still getting them. So every year is usually season alt season. We can say that has definitely happened this cycle, although it wasn't as long lasting as previous ones, but they did happen. And I would expect that this year we will also see a big one. But saying that, day after day, on my YouTube, it wears thin a little bit, I suppose. But remember, the overall expectation is based around a weekly chart, and those weekly charts look fine to still continue to assume that is going to be the end result. When everybody was calling for the cycle to be over down here, which they were, I was saying until we see it, the cycle's still on. There's a lot of people were saying that the cycle's broken, it's all over, cycle's broken, blah blah blah. Okay, well, you are all entitled, and nobody knows what the hell is going on around here. Do you know what I mean? Including me. We're all just people with opinions. It doesn't mean that nobody's right, nobody's wrong until it actually materializes, and then you can look back and go, okay, you were right, you were wrong. And even then, being right or wrong is one thing. Making money and losing money, that's the real important part of it. So me going on YouTube and giving my opinion is one thing. Me having risk management strategies to handle loss is another. And all we can do is give our best opinion that we believe in the hope that the market will eventually reward us for that. That's all it is. At the end of the day, still, despite all these wiggly lines and indicators, and some people spend thousands of dollars on special indicators or whatever, at the end of the day, still a gamble. Still a gamble. Of course it is. There is no one overlay that you can put onto a chart which will give you 100% guaranteed success. Myself, I prefer to focus on trend, and this is what we look at, this is what I look at every day on a variety of time frames. Trend and the strength of trend, or the weakness of a trend. And at the moment for Bitcoin, there is strength of trend. For the last few weeks, even before I went away, we recognized that we had a conversion baseline cross on the Ichimoku cloud on the weekly above the cloud. It's a 3-component signal which gives you reasonable confidence that we're in an uptrend, and then you have the criteria to say when the uptrend is over, or at least when the signal tells you that the uptrend is over. And at the moment, it's not. So we had this cheeky span. This is where we had a couple of weeks where if we had come down the week prior, we would have said, I like to say we, but it's just me. I would have said that, all right, this is a failed signal, but it didn't. I said, if it does it next week, we can come down lower. We can even come down to 95,000 and close above there, and the trend would still be still be in play. But if it had done that the previous week, we had no choice, and we had to have closed above $104,000, which we did. And now we're back above those levels, which means that, lucky for me at least, that I focused on this chart and this signal on this time frame. So this is an uptrend. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. When you zoom out, you can see it. A low high, high low, high high, high low, high high, and we're moving into a higher high. And between now and September, I'd expect a new all-time high. Could even happen next week. Could even happen next week. But like I said, when all that stuff was going on, trading a chart based on its own merit is one thing, and then recognizing the trading environment that surrounds that chart, which is obviously global events, all kinds of things that tie into that, have their own impact, and obviously we saw that recently, and it's still a little like that still now. We're not building on bedrock at the moment. We're still building on clay or sand. It's still a bit shaky out there. I wouldn't look at this chart and go, this is all I need to focus on. No, there is still a lot more going on behind this chart. But if we were to think about the correlation between Bitcoin and stocks, we're looking pretty good over here still. And again, focusing on a weekly, what do we see? No bearish divergence at all. At all, not in the slightest. We have a powerful V-shaped recovery, quite close to the 200 exponential, which I suppose, from a trading perspective, is the obvious place to try a big dip. Between the 50 and the 200, with a 5-minute time frame or a monthly time frame or wherever, usually results in a V-shaped recovery, as it did over here. This is your bear market, bang, ricochet, up, up, up and away. This was front run, but V-shaped recovery, and now we closed at a new all-time high, so without any signs of weakness on the high-term time frame. So the weekly looks okay, to be honest. It does look okay. Now, beyond that, the only other thing that we can think about, or the other thing that I think is worth thinking about, rather than just focusing on blindly, is how the Dixie was behaving and how we expected the Dixie to behave. So as we approached these resistances, I expected a pullback, and a pullback pulling us down to these levels. And at these levels is where it's likely to start to turn around. We're looking at this on a daily. If it hits this area, we'll bounce around it for a little bit. If we break down below it, it's actually going to be pretty chaotic for the dollar. Because this would be the breakdown of a trend line that's been in play for, give or take, about 14 years. It's a rising channel. Rising channels do often break down. They're more likely to break down than break out. However, as you come down to the rising channel, you have to reflect on the fact that this is support. So, we've seen, obviously, the first time, bang, second time, bang, third time, bang. This was the last sort of bull market moving into the bear market. So, the dollar does have a bit of a 4-year cycle involved with it, really. Just coincidental, I'm sure, but it does. And it has correlated with the last big bear market that took place for Bitcoin and crypto as well. But let's think about what it actually looks like when it hits the low. So we first approached a low in January 2021. Now, what was going on around there? Biggest gains in crypto ever. The biggest gains in crypto ever. We even went up throughout the period of January to I suppose even April. And we were still receiving the biggest consistent gains we'd seen in crypto probably ever, really. Generally, I suppose, ever, yes. And So we were hundreds, if not thousands of percent up between that period as the dollar was moving up. And we come back down and double bottomed, I suppose, where it was a higher low, and then that was it. And that was basically it. But still, the bear market didn't really kick in until around December of 2021, and the dollar had moved up a decent amount there. So all I'm saying is that that has happened, and it can happen again. It might even happen this time. I think when we come down to this area, we should start to think about what it's going to look like to exit the market. It's all working well as far as time is concerned, because again, my expectation is around September that I will certainly be keeping a very close eye on the market, for better or for worse, and looking to exit not just positions like medium-term positions, but hodls as well. It's time to take profit on some of those hodls. This has always been my plan. It's been my plan for a couple of years, and I don't see any reason to deviate from that plan, given that the Dixie looks like this, and just every other part of my analysis still rings true on the high-term time frame. So that's all I'm saying is my overall plan is unchanged, and if anything, it's being complemented by at least the Dixie, which is behaving the way I thought it was going to behave, which is that we will start to pull back towards this trend line. Again, it countered to what everybody was saying at the time. Everybody was saying it was going to go up to 120 or so, and I disagreed. I don't know what people will be saying soon, but they might be saying it's going to break down, and maybe that is true. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a very tight, it's a very tight overlay of a formation here, and I know that it's more likely to break down than break out. But is it going to be this time, or is it going to be 4 years from now? I don't know. No one knows. No one knows. But the long story short is that Bitcoin's still trending with its trend signal, the S&P not showing any signs of weakness really at all on the high-term time frames, and the dominance chart still, giving us toppy kind of signals. So it's boring for me to talk about this every morning. So maybe every other day I'll make a video if there's something to be changed. Obviously, I'm going to be doing my live stream tonight, so if you want to join that, there's a link in the description below for the Patreon. So I do those live streams twice a week. But honestly, I think really it's very simple, or I find it's very simple at the moment, which is at the moment I'm quite keen to take some positions, futures positions, as I have done already, and allow those to maybe even give me thousands of percent back between now and September. Obviously holding all the spots and getting all my hodls and taking things out of staking, because I don't want to be caught short. I don't want to be locked into staking. I want to be able to exit those giant positions when the time is right. But it's the same as it's always been. All right, just hold on to your horses. Altcoins go fast and hard, and Bitcoin is slow and steady. And I think the way it looks right now is that Bitcoin is slow and steady, with no real reason to doubt its continuous move up to a new all-time high. And eventually there'll be some form of rotation, or just alt season without rotation, or a combination of both, which will take the dominance chart down into the 40s and maybe even down towards 30s. I'm not saying that it's going to definitely happen. I'm just saying that there's enough evidence on the chart to suggest that it could. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I'm telling you what I'm doing with mine. And that shouldn't cause any concern. Nobody's that bothered about my safety or my financial well-being to disrupt the comments about how disgusting and distasteful it is that I've made an analysis and provided it online for free. But again, we're all wrong, we're all right sometimes. The main thing is, am I going to exit this year with an enormous tax bill or not? That's the question. Right, I'll leave it with you there. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a nice day. Take it easy.